Standing outside the venue I paid for, watching security guard the doors, I realized my invitation hadn't just been lost in the mail. My son and his fiancée had deliberately erased me from the happiest day of their lives, leaving me shattered in the parking lot while they celebrated inside without me. My name is Eleanor, and at 58, I never imagined I'd be the mother standing on the outside looking in. I've always been the rock of my family, especially after my husband passed away a decade ago. I raised my son, Liam, single-handedly, pouring every ounce of my love, energy, and life savings into ensuring he had the absolute best start in life. We were a team, him and me against the world, or at least, that is what I always believed. I work as a senior nurse at the county hospital, a demanding job that requires endless patience and empathy qualities I tried desperately to bring into my own home. When Liam first introduced me to Jessica, I welcomed her with wide-open arms. I wasn't just looking for a daughter-in-law, I was genuinely hoping for a daughter to cherish. I helped them put a substantial down payment on their first condo and cheerfully covered the deposits for this wedding because I wanted their life together to be completely burden-free. I thought we had a solid relationship, polite and cordial, though looking back now, perhaps I was the only one truly making the effort. I am not a controlling monster-in-law. I'm just a mother who loved her son too much to see the sharp cracks forming until the ground actually split beneath my feet. Deep down, my sensitivity stems from a profound, aching hollow that formed the day my husband, Martin, died. For 10 years, I haven't just been a widow, I have been a woman terrified of the silence. Liam became my noise, my purpose, my reason to get out of bed when the grief felt like a heavy, wet wool blanket suffocating me. I poured so much into him that I forgot to save any part of myself for me. My biggest fear isn't dying alone, it's living while being invisible to the people who mean the most to me. This fear manifests physically. When I sense distance, my hands start to tremble uncontrollably. A nervous tremor I hide by clasping them tightly in my lap until my knuckles turn stark white. My eyes, once bright with youthful optimism, are now often rimmed with red from nights spent overanalyzing simple conversations. I read into everything. If Jessica doesn't look me in the eye when she says hello, I feel a physical blow to my chest. My breath catches, and my heart hammers a frantic rhythm against my ribs, convinced that she sees me as a burden. I know this makes me difficult. I know my anxiety looks like intrusion to them. When I offer to cook or clean, it's not because I think they are incompetent. It is because I need to feel useful. I need to see a smile on their faces and know I put it there. This desperation makes me fragile. I walk on eggshells in my own life, constantly scanning their faces for micro-expressions of annoyance. A sigh from Liam can ruin my entire week. I find myself hunching over, making my body smaller, trying to take up less space while simultaneously screaming inside for acknowledgement. I carry a constant tension in my jaw and shoulders, bracing for an impact I can never quite predict. My love is fierce, yes, but it is also laced with the terrifying trauma of abandonment. I am not trying to control them. I am just frantically trying to keep the only family I have left from slipping through my fingers like sand. Every unanswered text feels like a rehearsal for a funeral, my funeral, where no one shows up because they simply forgot I existed. Before the wedding invitations vanished and the security guards were hired, our lives actually felt like a warm, well-lit room. Sundays were our sacred days. I would wake up early, the smell of roasting chicken and rosemary filling my small kitchen, anticipating their arrival with a light heart. Liam and Jessica would come over around 1 o'clock, their faces bright and relaxed, bringing a cheerful energy into my quiet home. We didn't fight, we laughed. I remember one specific afternoon vividly, the three of us sitting on my back porch, drinking iced tea as the sun dipped low, casting a golden glow over the garden. Jessica was showing me Pinterest boards for the wedding decor, asking for my opinion on floral arrangements. She touched my arm, squeezed it gently, and said, "Eleanor, you have such great taste. We definitely need your help with the centerpieces." My heart swelled with a joy so pure it felt like sunshine in my veins. I felt included, valued, and essential to their happiness. We even went dress shopping together, just the two of us, a few months ago. I remember the way she spun around in a lace mermaid gown, her eyes catching mine in the mirror. She didn't look at me with annoyance then. She looked at me for validation and shared excitement. We grabbed lunch afterward, sharing a salad and laughing about how expensive wedding cakes had become. I offered to cover the catering costs right there, reaching across the table to hold her hand. Her skin was soft, her grip firm and grateful. "You're too generous, Mom," she had said. She called me Mom. That single word felt like a trophy I had earned. There was no tension in my shoulders then. My body was relaxed, my smiles were genuine, extending all the way to my eyes. I slept soundly those nights, believing that I wasn't just losing a son, but gaining a true daughter. It was a period of blissful ignorance, a happy montage of family dinners and shared dreams that I thought was the permanent reality of our lives. The shift wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow, suffocating freeze that started about 2 months before the big day. It began innocently enough, or so I believed, during a Sunday afternoon meeting to finalize the guest list. I had sat down with them at my kitchen table, a notebook in hand and my reading glasses perched on my nose, feeling helpful and organized. As I scanned their list, I noticed it was dominated entirely by their college friends and Jessica's extended family. "Oh, honey," I had said, tapping the paper gently with my pen, "you've accidentally left off the Johnsons and your cousins from Idaho, and surely we need to invite Dr. Evans. He's known you since you were in diapers." I wasn't being demanding. I was correcting a simple oversight. Jessica didn't say a word. Her posture stiffened immediately, her spine snapping straight against the hard wooden chair. I saw her jaw clench, a small muscle feathering under her skin, betraying the anger she was trying to suppress. She didn't look at me, she looked at Liam. Her eyes were hard, practically boring holes into the side of his head, silently demanding he handle me. Liam sighed, that heavy, exhausted sound that makes my stomach churn with anxiety. "Mom, we want a small wedding. Intimate. We don't really know those people anymore." I felt a flush of heat rise up my neck, my hands starting to tremble slightly, so I quickly hid them under the table, clasping them together until it hurt. "But Liam," I reasoned, my voice wobbling just a fraction, "I've already paid the significant deposit for the larger hall. There is plenty of room. It seems incredibly rude to exclude family who sent you graduation gifts." I thought I was being logical. I thought I was protecting their reputation and maximizing the investment I had made. But the air in the room turned frigid. Jessica finally turned to me, her face completely void of the warmth I had seen just weeks ago. "It's our wedding, Eleanor, not your family reunion." Her tone was ice. From that day on, the communication withered. I would send texts asking about the cake tasting or the flower arrangements, just trying to bridge the growing gap, trying to show I still cared, but days would pass without a reply. When I did get a response, it was one word: fine, good, handled. I felt like a stranger tapping on the glass of their lives. I spent nights pacing my living room, wringing my hands until the skin was raw, my chest tight with a panic that wouldn't release. I interpreted their silence as busy stress, not malice. I kept telling myself, they are just overwhelmed. I need to do more to help relieve the pressure. In a desperate bid to fix the mood, I went to the florist and upgraded the centerpieces as a surprise, thinking the grander display would delight Jessica. When I texted them the good news, I didn't get a thank you. I got a phone call from Liam, his voice tight and foreign. "Stop interfering, Mom. You are crossing boundaries." I stood in my kitchen, clutching the phone, tears stinging my eyes. Interfering? I was giving. I was loving. How could they not see that? My heart raced constantly, a fluttery, sick feeling that made it hard to eat. I felt like I was watching a movie of my own life where the audio was out of sync. Every attempt I made to fix things seemed to break them further, but I couldn't stop trying because the alternative, letting go, felt like dying. I was drowning in my own good intentions, completely blind to the fact that I was the one holding the hose. The wedding day arrived with a cruel, beautiful blue sky. I had convinced myself that the radio silence of the last week was just pre-wedding jitters, a chaotic oversight that would be laughed about later. I drove to the estate, the venue I had personally selected and put the deposit on, dressed in a navy silk gown that cost more than my first car. I felt anxious, yes, my palms slick with sweat against the leather steering wheel, but I was ready to forgive them. I was ready to be the bigger person, to hug them and cry happy tears. Walking up the stone path, I saw the security guard, a large man in a fitted black suit, standing like a statue before the heavy oak doors. I smiled, clutching my beaded purse tight to my side, and moved to step past him. His arm shot out like a toll gate, blocking my path. "Name, ma'am?" he asked, his voice monotone. "I'm Eleanor," I said, my voice trembling slightly with a mixture of pride and nerves. "The groom's mother." He scanned the clipboard, his thick finger tracing down the lines. Then he stopped. He looked up, his expression flat and unyielding. "I'm sorry, you aren't on the list." I laughed, a brittle, high-pitched sound that didn't sound like me at all. "Don't be silly. I paid for this venue. Check again. It's a mistake." "I have specific instructions, ma'am," he said, stepping closer to fill the doorway. "No entry for Eleanor." The bride and groom were very clear. The world tilted on its axis. My blood ran cold, draining from my face so fast I felt dizzy. I reached out, my manicured fingers gripping the cold iron of the gate for support because my knees had suddenly turned to water. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a painful, erratic rhythm. "Call Liam," I whispered, my throat constricting as if a hand were squeezing it. "Tell him his mother is here." The wedding coordinator, a woman named Sarah, whom I had lunched with just last month to discuss napkins, hurried out from the shadows. She didn't look me in the eye. She stared at her clipboard, shifting her weight uncomfortably. "Eleanor, please," she said softly, her voice pitying. "Don't make a scene. They removed you from the guest list on Tuesday. They said your presence would be too stressful for the bride." Too stressful. The words hit me like a physical slap across the face. My mouth fell open, a silent scream dying in my throat. I looked past them, through the open French doors of the foyer. I saw the back of Liam's head. I saw the train of Jessica's dress. They were standing there, surrounded by her family, laughing at something the photographer said. They looked relieved. They looked happy. They were celebrating my money, in my venue, without me. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud crack. It was a quiet, devastating implosion. The tears that had been threatening to spill suddenly evaporated. The trembling in my hands ceased, replaced by a rigid, stone-cold stillness. I felt my face harden, the muscles in my jaw locking tight. I looked at the checkbook in my purse, the one I had brought to pay the final catering bill due upon arrival. I looked at the coordinator, then at the guard, and finally at my son through that glass. My chest heaved, a ragged intake of breath that burned my lungs. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a stranger they had robbed. The humiliation washed over me, hot and prickly, followed instantly by a wave of icy clarity. I wiped a smudge of lipstick from the corner of my mouth with a shaking finger, straightened my spine until it popped, and stared at the coordinator. The unconditional love I had been desperately trying to pour into this black hole of a relationship curdled instantly into something much darker. They didn't want a mother? Fine. They wouldn't have a financier either. I didn't storm off. I didn't scream or throw a tantrum. Instead, I turned on my heel with a calculated slowness that felt terrifyingly calm. Sarah, the coordinator, scurried after me, her heels clicking frantically on the pavement. "Eleanor, wait, the final catering balance. It's due before the reception dinner begins. You have the check, right?" I stopped near my car and turned to face her. The afternoon sun caught the sequins on my dress, a dress chosen to match a color scheme I was now banned from. I reached into my purse, my fingers brushing against the cool leather of the checkbook. I pulled it out. Sarah sighed with visible relief, reaching out her hand. "The total is 12,000, right?" I asked, my voice smooth, devoid of the quiver that had plagued me for months. "Yes, exactly. If we don't settle it now, the head chef can't release the main courses. It's policy." I looked at the check I had already written out, signed with love and excitement just that morning. Then, looking Sarah dead in the eye, I slowly, deliberately, ripped the check in half. The sound of the tearing paper was sharp, slicing through the ambient noise of the distant string quartet. Then I ripped it again. And again. "Eleanor!" Sarah gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "What are you doing? Who is going to pay?" "The bride and groom," I said, dropping the confetti of blue paper into her open, trembling palm. "Since I am not a guest, I am certainly not the financier. Tell Liam and Jessica that the stressful element has been removed, and so has the bank account. Good luck with the chicken." I got into my car, the slam of the door acting as the period at the end of a very long, painful sentence. As I drove away, glancing in the rearview mirror to see Sarah sprinting back toward the venue in a panic, a strange sensation washed over me. It wasn't happiness, it was power. I wasn't done. The drive home was a blur of adrenaline. I pulled my phone out and dialed my bank's priority line on speaker. My hands were steady on the wheel. "This is Eleanor. I need to report a compromised account." "Yes, the joint credit card ending in 4,588. Freeze it. Immediately." "No, do not authorize any pending charges. Mark it as stolen." That card was the one Liam carried for emergencies, which had lately translated to wedding extras. I knew for a fact they planned to use it for the open bar tab tonight. Click. Declined. Next, I called the travel agency. The agent, Brenda, was an old friend. "Brenda, it's Eleanor. The honeymoon to the Maldives? Cancel it." "But Eleanor," Brenda stammered, "it's non-refundable within 48 hours. You'll lose the entire $10,000. "I don't care about the refund," I said, my voice hardening. "I care about the cancellation. I want the reservation voided. I want the seats released. If they show up at the airport tomorrow, I want them to have nowhere to go. Do it." "Okay, it's done," she whispered, clearly terrified. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the house looked different. It wasn't a lonely tomb anymore. It was my fortress. But then I remembered Liam had a key. He used it to drop off his laundry or borrow tools. Not anymore. I called a 24-hour emergency locksmith before I even took off my coat. 30 minutes later, the drill whirred, grinding into the metal of my front door. The sound was aggressive, loud, and incredibly satisfying. I watched the old lock, the one Liam had opened 1,000 times, fall to the ground with a heavy thud. The locksmith handed me the new shiny brass keys. I closed my fist around them, the metal biting into my palm. I went inside, poured myself a large glass of expensive red wine I had been saving for a toast that would never happen, and sat in the dark living room. My phone started buzzing, then ringing, then buzzing again. I didn't look at it. I just sat there, sipping my wine, feeling the justice settle in my bones like a heavy, warm blanket. Let them eat cake if they can afford it. The backlash didn't wait for Monday. It arrived at 8 a.m. the next morning with a violent, rhythmic pounding on my front door that shook the picture frames in the hallway. I wrapped my robe tighter around myself, my stomach dropping, and peered through the peephole. It wasn't just Liam. It was Liam, Jessica still wearing her smudged makeup from the night before, and 2 uniformed police officers. I opened the door, keeping the chain securely latched. "What is this?" I asked, my voice trembling, not with fear, but with sudden shock. "Ma'am," the taller officer said, stepping forward while Liam cowered slightly behind his wife. "We received a report of theft and a request for an immediate welfare check regarding a potential mental health crisis." I froze. My breath hitched in my throat, turning into a dry, painful cough. "Excuse me?" Jessica stepped forward, her eyes swollen, but her voice sharp, venomous, and desperate. "She's losing it, officer. She has early onset dementia. She promised us that money, transferred it, and then yesterday she just snapped. She forgot who was invited to the wedding and stole the funds back. She's acting erratic and is a danger to herself. We need to be granted emergency power of attorney to unfreeze those assets for her own protection." My own son stood there, staring at his expensive Italian leather shoes, while his wife painted me as a senile criminal to the authorities, just to salvage their honeymoon funds. The betrayal was so physical I felt it in my teeth. My hands flew to my chest, clutching the fabric of my robe as if to physically hold my breaking heart inside. They weren't just angry, they were trying to dismantle my legal sanity to get to my wallet. "Liam," I whispered, the sound barely escaping my lips. "You know that isn't true. Tell them." He finally looked up, his eyes dead, cold, and frighteningly empty. "You ruined everything, Mom. You're clearly not well. Just give us the access codes and stop this scene." The realization hit me with the force of a freight train. They didn't come for an apology. They came to institutionalize me. My blood turned to ice, the shock morphing instantly into a terrified, vibrating rage. The accusation hung in the morning air, heavy and suffocating. Early onset dementia. It was a brilliant, evil strategy. If they could prove I was mentally incompetent, they could override my financial freezes and drain my accounts dry. But they had forgotten one crucial detail. I am not just a mother. I am a medical professional who deals with crisis management every single day. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I took a deep, steadying breath, my training kicking in. I looked at the officer, my eyes locking onto his with laser-focused intensity. "Officer," I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming authoritative and crystal clear. "I am the senior head nurse at County General. I managed a 12-hour shift in the ER 3 days ago. I can tell you the date, the president, my social security number backwards, and the exact dosage of medication required for a cardiac arrest. I am not having a mental health crisis. I am having a boundary dispute with 2 people who are upset that their bank turned off the faucet." I reached into my robe pocket and pulled out my phone. My hands were rock steady now. I unlocked it and navigated to the text thread with the wedding coordinator. "Officer, please look at this." I held the screen up. The message from yesterday afternoon was clear. "Eleanor, per the bride and groom's request, you are removed from the guest list. Security has been instructed to deny you entry." "I did not steal money," I continued, addressing the police, but letting my words slice through Liam. "I canceled payments for a party I was banned from attending. In the state of Ohio, a gift is a voluntary transfer of property. Until the check is cashed or the service rendered, it is revocable. I revoked it." The officer read the text, his expression shifting from suspicion to understanding, and finally, to annoyance at having his time wasted. He looked at Jessica, who was now pale, her hands trembling as she realized her narrative was crumbling. "Ma'am," the officer said to Jessica, his tone stern, "this looks like a civil matter, not a police matter. And frankly, suggesting a medical crisis to leverage a financial dispute is dangerously close to filing a false police report." "But she's lying!" Jessica shrieked, her composure shattering. "She promised us that money. we have vendors waiting to be paid. She's ruining our lives. No, I cut in, my voice cold as steel. You ruined your own lives when you decided I was good enough to pay, but not good enough to stay. I turned to the officer again. I would like these people removed from my property. They are trespassing. If they return, I will be contacting my attorney, Mr. Henderson, to file a restraining order and a countersuit for attempted financial elder abuse. I believe attempting to have a mentally sound person declared incompetent to access their assets constitutes fraud, does it not? The word fraud hung in the air. Liam flinched physically. He knew who Mr. Henderson was, the shark of a lawyer who handled his father's estate. The officer turned to my son. Sir, I suggest you and your wife leave immediately. If we have to come back here, you're the ones leaving in cuffs. Liam looked at me, his eyes pleading for a second, searching for the mother who used to fold instantly at his discomfort. He didn't find her. He found Eleanor, the woman who had finally learned her worth. He grabbed Jessica's arm, dragging her backward down the porch steps. As they retreated to their car, defeated and humiliated, the officer tipped his hat to me. Have a good day, ma'am. I intend to, I replied, and for the first time in months, I meant it. The silence that filled my house after the police cruiser faded around the bend wasn't the lonely, terrifying silence I had feared for a decade. It was the rich, heavy silence of peace. For the first time in years, the constant, low-level hum of anxiety, the what will they think, did I do enough, are they mad at me, was gone. It had been replaced by a fortress of my own making. I locked the door, engaging the new deadbolt with a solid thud, and realized I wasn't locking them out. I was locking myself in with my own dignity. That Monday, I took the day off work. I didn't spend it crying in bed. I put on my best blazer, drank my coffee black, and drove straight to Mr. Henderson's office. He was an old-school attorney, the kind with mahogany desks and a grim expression. But when I told him the story, even his stony face softened into a look of fierce protectiveness. We spent 2 hours restructuring my entire estate. Are you sure, Eleanor? He asked, his pen hovering over the final clause of the new will. This disinherits him completely. No trust fund, no house, no insurance payout. I looked at the document. It was just paper, but it felt like an amputation, painful, yes, but necessary to stop the spread of infection. I am sure, I said, my voice steady. He made his choice when he tried to declare me incompetent. I am simply validating his claim that we are no longer family. I signed the papers with a flourish. The ink was dark and permanent. I also established a revocable living trust for my assets, ensuring that if I did ever get sick, a court-appointed professional would handle my affairs, never Liam or Jessica. Walking out of that office into the bright afternoon sunlight, I felt lighter, physically lighter. The burden of carrying a grown man on my back, his expectations, his bills, his emotional instability had evaporated. I checked my bank account on my phone. The money I had clawed back from the venue, the caterer, and the travel agency was all there. It was a substantial sum, a nest egg I had scraped together by denying myself luxuries for years. I walked past a travel agency, not Brenda's, but a new one. On a whim, I went inside. I sat down and looked at the agent. I have $10,000 that was supposed to be for a honeymoon in the Maldives, I told her. But I think I'd prefer a culinary tour of Tuscany, for one, first class. The booking process was intoxicating. I wasn't asking for permission. I wasn't worrying if the dates worked for Liam's schedule. I was doing exactly what I wanted. When I handed over my credit card, my own card, the one only I had access to, I felt a rush of adrenaline that was better than any drug. I was going to Italy. I was going to drink wine and eat pasta and look at art, and I wasn't going to check my phone once. That night, I sat on my patio with a glass of wine. My phone was silent because I had blocked their numbers. I didn't wonder if they were angry. I didn't care if they were scrambling to pay their vendors. I looked at the stars and realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't a widow and I wasn't a mother. I was just Eleanor. And for the first time in a very, very long time, Eleanor was enough. Even though I felt triumphant booking that ticket to Italy, the nights are still difficult. I sit in my armchair, the house wrapped in a silence that feels different now, less peaceful, more final. My eyes wander to the mantelpiece, to a framed photo of Liam at his college graduation, his arm draped tightly around my shoulders, both of us beaming with pride. I reach out, my fingers trembling slightly as they trace the cold glass over his face, and a sharp, physical ache radiates from the center of my chest. It is a phantom limb pain. I have amputated a part of my soul to save the rest of it. I wrestle with the guilt. It gnaws at me at 3 a.m., a relentless, whispering ghost. A voice in my head asks, "Was it too harsh? He is your only child. Maybe you should have just paid. Maybe you should have swallowed the humiliation one last time for the sake of peace. I squeezed my eyes shut, my hands gripping the armrests of the chair until my knuckles turned stark white, trying to physically crush that weak, pleading voice. I know I did the right thing. I know it logically. But my heart is a traitorous organ that remembers the weight of him as a newborn, the way he used to cry for me when he scraped his knee. However, when I remember the look in his eyes when the police arrived, that cold, calculating emptiness, the guilt instantly hardens into a jagged resolve. That wasn't my son. That was a stranger willing to lock me away for a check. I realize with a sickening jolt that I am partially to blame. I watered the weeds. I gave so freely, so without condition, that I taught him my resources were his birthright and my feelings were irrelevant. I confused martyrdom with motherhood. I thought if I gave enough, I would be unleavable. I was wrong. The pain is visceral. It sits heavy in my stomach, making it hard to swallow my tea. I grieve not for the man he is, but for the boy he was, and for the version of myself that believed love alone was enough to sustain respect. It wasn't, and accepting that is the hardest thing I have ever had to do. Standing in the center of the Uffizi Gallery in Florence weeks later, staring up at Botticelli's Birth of Venus, I felt a single, hot tear slide down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of grief, but of recognition. For the first time, I saw myself not as a fragmented extension of my son, but as a whole, vibrant woman. I learned that my worth is not a currency to be traded for attention. I realized that family is defined by behavior, not biology, and that tolerating disrespect is a form of self-abuse I am no longer willing to commit. My hands, which used to tremble with the anxiety of pleasing others, are steady now as I hold my espresso cup. I have learned that the fear of abandonment is a liar. I am not alone, I am simply with myself, and I have discovered that I am actually quite wonderful company. I don't need to buy affection to be worthy of it, and that realization has unchained my spirit. To secure this new peace, I made radical changes. I sold the large family home that echoed with the ghosts of the past. It was a museum of memories I no longer needed to curate. I bought a chic, modern condo downtown with a view of the skyline, a space that is entirely mine, decorated in creams and whites that I never would have chosen when I was worrying about muddy shoes or sticky fingers. I joined a hiking club and a wine-tasting group, surrounding myself with people my own age who value me for my wit, not my wallet. I also started volunteering at the neonatal unit, pouring my nurturing instincts into babies who actually need it, without the toxic expectation of return. I am building a life so full and loud with my own joy that there is simply no room left for silence or regret. However, I also have to confront the uncomfortable truth of my own failure. Looking back, my greatest error was believing that total sacrifice was the highest form of love. It wasn't love. It was a transaction I didn't know I was making. I crippled Liam by never letting him fall. Every time I paid a bill he couldn't afford or smoothed over a conflict he caused, I was robbing him of the chance to grow into a man. I see now that my help was actually a form of control, a way to ensure I was needed because I was terrified of being useless. It hurts to admit that my stomach twists with the nausea of hindsight, but it is the truth. I raised a son who felt entitled to my life because I never showed him where I ended, and he began. I forgive myself for not knowing better then, but I will never repeat that mistake again. To all the parents out there who feel like their hearts are walking around outside their bodies, listen to me closely. We are conditioned to believe that a mother's love must be unconditional, a bottomless well that never runs dry no matter how much is taken from it. But there is a profound difference between being a supportive parent and being a doormat. Unconditional love does not mean unconditional tolerance for abuse. You have the right to occupy space in your own life. You have the right to your dignity, your resources, and your feelings. If your relationship with your adult children is built solely on what you can provide, be it money, housing, or silence, then you do not have a relationship. You have a hostage situation. For the adult children watching this, remember that your parents are human beings with internal worlds as complex and fragile as your own. We are not just background characters in the movie of your life, existing solely to dispense checks and then fade into the woodwork. When you cut us out, when you weaponize access to your life or your grandchildren to control us, you aren't setting boundaries, you are inflicting trauma. Boundaries are supposed to be about protection, not punishment. If you want respect, you must give it. You cannot demand an adult relationship while acting like a petulant child who wants the toy but hates the hand that gives it. Communication is the oxygen of any family. If Liam and Jessica had sat me down and spoken to me with kindness about their need for space, I would have listened. I would have stepped back. But they chose erasure. They chose to treat me like a disposable asset. And in doing so, they taught me the most valuable lesson of all. You teach people how to treat you. If you allow yourself to be treated as an option, you will never be a priority. Don't be afraid to close the checkbook. Don't be afraid to change the locks. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself, and even for them, is to walk away and let them grow up on their own dime. So, here I am, sipping a cappuccino in a sun-drenched Italian piazza, living a life I thought was over. I lost a son, yes, and that wound will always ache, but I found myself. And honestly, she's pretty great. I know my actions might seem harsh to some, or empowering to others. I really want to know what you think. Did I go too far by canceling the honeymoon, or did they get exactly what they deserved? If you have ever felt taken for granted or had to make a tough choice to protect your peace, please share your story in the comments below. I read every single one. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like this video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. There is plenty more tea to spill. Until next time, remember to take care of you.